He convinced his followers he was a prophet, a man chosen by God, a healer, a protector. And they believed him, completely, totally, without question. They left their families for him, gave him their money, their bodies, their children. And when he picked up a knife and told them it was medicine, they let him cut. Roch Thériault was born in 1947 in rural Quebec, Canada. By most accounts, his early life was unremarkable. A working-class upbringing, a restless personality, and an obsession with religion that grew louder as he got older. He drifted through various Seventh-day Adventist communities in the 1970s, preaching with an intensity that made people stop and listen. He had a gift, not for faith, but for people, for reading them, for finding the ones who were lonely, lost, or desperate for something to believe in. And in 1977, he found enough of them to start something of his own. He gathered a small group of followers in the province of Quebec and told them the end of the world was coming, that God had spoken to him personally, that the only way to survive, what was ahead, was to follow Roch Thériault into the wilderness and trust him completely. 12 adults went with him, several brought their children. They called themselves the Ant Hill Kids. The commune was established deep in the forests of Ontario, far from roads, far from neighbors, and far from anyone who might ask questions. At first, life there looked almost peaceful. They built their own shelters, grew their own food, and gathered each evening to hear Thériault preach. He called himself Moses, then Papi, a father figure to everyone, and he made sure they felt it. But control, once established, rarely stays still. Thériault began drinking heavily, and when he drank, the rules shifted. Punishments became physical. Rituals became degrading. He took multiple women as his wives, some of them teenagers, and fathered over 24 children within the commune. He decided who ate and who didn't, who slept and who worked through the night. He separated parents from children, couples from each other, systematically dismantling every relationship that wasn't centered on him. And still, they stayed. That's the part people always struggle to understand. Why didn't they leave? But that's not how coercive control works. By the time the violence started, these people had no money, no outside relationships, no identity that existed apart from the group. Leaving meant admitting that the person you'd given everything to had lied, that the life you'd built was a cage. For many of them, that was simply unthinkable. So they stayed. And things got worse. Somewhere along the way, Roch Thériault decided he was a healer, not a spiritual healer, though he claimed that too, a medical healer. A man with the knowledge and the divine authority to treat the sick, repair the injured, and save lives with his own hands. He had no medical training, no education beyond what he'd taught himself from books he'd collected in the commune. But in a group where his word was gospel, that didn't matter. He began performing procedures. It started small, pulling teeth, lancing infections, things that could almost be explained away. But Thériault's interventions escalated in proportion to his drinking and his ego. He began operating on followers for complaints that didn't require surgery. He performed procedures without anesthesia, without sterile equipment, and without any understanding of what he was actually doing inside. A human body. Members who were ill were brought to him instead of to hospitals. Members who were injured were treated by him, and him alone. When one of his followers, a woman named Solange Boilard, became seriously ill, Thériault decided to operate on her stomach. He cut her open on a table in the commune while she was conscious. When she died on that table, he opened her body further and massaged her heart, claiming he could bring her back. He could not. Her death was ruled a homicide. Thériault fled with his followers before police could act. They moved deeper into the wilderness, into New Brunswick, and the surgeries continued. Of all the cases documented within the Ant Hill Kids commune, one stands apart. Gabrielle Lavallee had been a member of the group for years. She had endured beatings, degradation, and procedures at Thériault's hands. But in 1988, she suffered an injury to her arm that Thériault decided required his attention. What followed was a series of interventions spread over months. He operated on her arm repeatedly. He injected it with substances. He inserted a wire into the wound. Each procedure caused more damage than the last, and each time, Thériault declared that the problem was her fault, that her body was resisting, that she needed more treatment. Eventually, he amputated her arm himself, with a wire saw, without anesthesia. Gabrielle survived, and when she finally escaped the commune in 1989, she went directly to the police. Her testimony, combined with the physical evidence investigators found, was what ultimately brought Thériault down. He was arrested. Followers who had participated in or witnessed the abuse were interviewed, and the full scope of what had happened in those woods began to come to light. Roch Thériault was charged with multiple offenses. He was convicted of the second-degree murder of Solange Boilard and the aggravated assault of Gabrielle Lavallee, among other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. In interviews conducted after his arrest, Thériault showed little remorse. He spoke about his followers with a possessiveness that never fully left him. He still referred to himself in terms that suggested he believed, or wanted others to believe, that he had been something extraordinary. In February 2011, Roch Thériault was murdered in his prison cell by his cellmate. He was 63 years old. Some of his former followers, even after everything, struggled to fully separate themselves from what he had meant to them. That is not weakness. That is the long shadow of what total psychological control does to a person. It doesn't end when the leader is gone. It lives in the mind long after the body is free. The Anthill Kids case is not just a story about a violent man. It's a story about how ordinary people with hopes and fears and a genuine desire for meaning, can be systematically stripped of their judgment, their autonomy, and eventually their safety. Roch Thériault didn't start with a knife. He started with a sermon, with warmth and certainty, and the oldest promise in the world: I will take care of you. He just never said what that would cost. Follow Scream Index. Face the darkest corners of human nature, if you dare.